New game Verdant Moon has been released recently, and it is blown the fuck up. It's been released to a lot of praise, and a lot of people have been enjoying the game. I, of course, am no exception. The exploration factor is insanely well done. The map is just phenomenal. It rivals that of games like Rogue Lineage and other games in its genre, rivaling GPO and other exploration-focused games. The game is also fairly good when it comes to its combat fundamentals. And I honestly think it's unique, as it still has the 5-hit string with the ragdoll at the end, like most other fighting games on the platform now, such as the aforementioned GPO or Demon Fall, or of course Rogue Lineage. But with the caveat that it's actually quite escapable during these combos. It's very reminiscent of Dark Souls and other From Software games with PvP, where you can roll out of combo strings after 1 or 2 hits, which makes fights last a lot longer and a lot more dynamic, as the combo strings are a lot more forgiving and leave a lot more leeway for fights to sort of turn around. And the weapons and classes are fairly well balanced, as you can use just about anything and you'll be able to scrap with people at any given skill level. That is, with one exception. Now, one might ask what I mean by Verdant Moon's Greatsword problem. And, well, to get into that, I'll need to explain myself a little bit more thoroughly, so you kind of get where I'm coming from. Weapon types in medieval fantasy games, or really any sort of game that relies on medieval weaponry for its combat, will consist of 3 primary sort of stat categories. These categories are power, speed, and range. If your game is to be balanced, you'll need every weapon or class to have an equal number of total points. The difference between classes would be where these points are located. For the sake of this graph, we'll go with 10 total points. Now, sword, for example, is pretty well-rounded. It will have, like, say, 3 in range or power, but then a 4 in speed. Or a spear, which would be pretty similar to the sword, but instead of a 4 in speed, it would have a 4 in range, with a 3 in the other categories. The only of these 3 sort of standard weapons would be the dagger, which only has a 2 in power and range in exchange for having a whopping 6 speed. Now, you can imagine what the other weapons in the game are like on this chart, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it at that. Now, here is what a greatsword should look like. It's meant to have an immense amount of power at a whopping 5, an above average range at 4, but in exchange it would have a insanely low speed of 1. If you were to go with this, and your game uses flinch mechanics, as most fighting games do at this point, you'd probably have to make this weapon the exception to the rule and give it some sort of super armor during its attacks. And I'll go more thoroughly into that later when I propose solutions. Because if you don't, then everything's just gonna bully it. Like that Jujutsu Kaisen scene.
Fight back! Fight back!
Where the problem comes in is that, well, in Verdant Moon, the Greatsword is a little bit more like this. As you can see, the current Greatsword lacks a total of 10 points. Every weapon would need to have for it to be balanced. Because, well, while it does have the range it needs, and it has a low enough speed, it seriously lacks in the power department. and neither its speed or its range properly make up for this glaring weakness. So Greatsword among equally skilled players will almost always be bodied by any given weapon, with the only exceptions being glaringly obvious counters like Push Dagger. This part's actually a lot easier than you might think. All you'd really need to do for a quick fix is just to slightly buff the Greatsword's damage, really. Just like make its damage actually match its weight and size. Right now its main issue is that like its power just isn't justifying its slow weightiness. A slight improvement would just just buff its damage to bring its power to like a 4, giving it the 10 total points it needs to be on par with everything else. However, if you really want Greatsword to function as it like actually should, you'd buff the damage a substantial amount to bring its power to a 5, and then nerf its speed a considerable amount to bring its speed down to a 1. This would both make it viable and make it more logically consistent with you swinging around a giant heap of fucking iron with one arm. So, some alternative solutions if you don't like the idea of just buffing the damage a bit. Well, a lot, but that's beside the point. Another way you could fix this is by just slightly buffing the damage, but keeping its current speed and changing its swing animations a bit to cover a wider arc and give it a third M1. What you could do is give it 2 horizontal swings and then a vertical overhead slam. Sort of like one of the moves, but like the M1s and way less janky. Giving the Greatsword a much more reliable hitbox, allowing it to actually, use its range better. Better damage per hit, and better combo potential since you're doing 3 hits instead of just like 1 or maybe 2. And making it, have a wider swing radius would make Greatsword serve an actual purpose, being crowd control, which it can kind of do now, but way limited in its extent to do that. This would be, of course, a lot more hard to implement, as you'd be making entirely new animations. Another thing you could do, which is more so just a further elaboration on the previously described fix, where you buff the damage and nerf the speed, would be to give it a sort of poise system, where it essentially has 1 to 3 hits of super armor, but then if you're staggered, it takes a few seconds for you to get your super armor back. So essentially, if something's able to hit you a couple times, they're able to then stagger you for a while and land a few extra hits. This would make it so that since you have the super armor in the first place, you'd be much more able to fight back against faster opponents. And with the 2 to 3 hit rule, careful footwork on your opponent's end can very much lead to you dying, because they'll be able to stagger you if they play their cards right. Essentially making fights with Greatsword take a bit more skill than just being faster than them or having better hitboxes. Alright, this wouldn't make Fortify completely redundant, as that would still be necessary to counter spells and stuff, since anything that ragdolls would break through this sort of passive poise super armor instantly. So the reason this probably won't get fixed in the near future, at least I don't think it will, is primarily because the community is full of a lot of low IQ dipshits, just really stupid people. So you just have a bunch of new people who die to Greatsword, or like people who win with Greatsword, because like the 2 times where they just held S and mashed M1 and it somehow worked because the person they were fighting was somehow even dumber than they are, and they're just all gonna collectively think, wow, Greatsword is really OP because like they caught some idiot off guard or something, or they were an idiot who got caught off guard, vice versa. Even though you could do the same thing that they did in that scenario with any given weapon and see the same, if not a better result. So that's honestly probably what's gonna hold it back the most. It's just lack of people really being aware that, you know, Greatsword's in a really shitty spot right now. I genuinely really like this game and its artistic direction, and I really hope that these issues I've highlighted can be fixed, as it really wouldn't be that hard to fix, in my opinion. If the points in this video, like if you agree with what I've said here, please share this video to like any Discords you're in or people who are like into the game, as spreading this information will make it a bit more likely that a dev stumbles upon this, or the general consensus of the community might shift in this direction, which would probably overall make it more likely that a dev would sort of see this issue and take action to sort of correct what's going on. Because, bro, I'm not gonna lie, they did Greatsword dirty here. Like they did it pretty dirty in this game. I'm not gonna lie. Like, how are you gonna tell me that like a massive, what looks like what 50 to 100 kilograms of just raw iron is being slammed on someone, and it's gonna do the same damage as like a normal ass sword just sort of slashing at them? Like, come on now. What? No, that's stupid. Come on now. That's gotta be fixed. That's come on. That's gotta be dealt with, in my personal opinion. Still a phenomenal game. Still probably the best PvP in the scene right now. But like, come on. Of course, these critiques are purely meant to be constructive in nature. I'm by no means trying to take down the game or anything. This is just something I wish the game would improve on in terms of its PvP balancing.